Good day, everyone. Today we will tackle about ecological literacy. Ecological literacy is a term first used by American educator David W. Orr and physicist Fritjof Capra in the 1990s. It is defined as a way of thinking about the world in terms of its interdependent natural and human systems, including a consideration of the consequences of human actions and interactions within the natural context. Ecological literacy equips students with the knowledge and competencies necessary to address complex and urgent environmental issues in an integrated way, and enables them to help shape a sustainable society that does not undermine the ecosystems upon which it depends. Students understand the natural systems that sustain life on Earth and apply the principles guiding ecosystems to help create sustainable human communities. There are 5 core aspects of ecological literacy. The first one is the principles of living systems. A key part of ecoliteracy is reconnecting students to living systems, what educator Linda Booth Sweeney calls developing a connected wisdom. Living systems are open, self-organizing systems that have the special characteristic of life and that interact with their environment through information and material energy exchanges. Connecting students to natural systems provides them with a deep sense of place and an understanding of their local environment. In order to understand living system, there are 12 principles related to it. There are living systems on all scales, from the smallest plankton to the human body to the planet as a whole. When we understand what constitutes a living system, we see that a family, a business, even a country are also living systems. The 12 living system principles are interdependence, system integrity, biodiversity, cooperation and partnership, rightness of size, waste equal food, living cycles, feedback, nonlinearity, emergent properties, flux, and the commons. Still under the principles of living systems are the ecological principles. We will start first with the fundamental facts of life. These are matter cycles continually through the web of life. Most of the energy driving the ecological cycles flows from the sun. Diversity assures resilience. One species' waste is another species' food. Life did not take over the planet by combat but by networking. This just means that creating communities that are compatible with nature's processes for sustaining life requires basic ecological knowledge. Says Center for Ecoliteracy co-founder Fritjof Capra, we need to teach our children and our political and corporate leaders these fundamental facts of life. Still under the ecological principles is nature's patterns and processes. Understanding these facts arises from understanding the patterns and processes by which nature sustains life. In its work with teachers and schools, the Center for Ecoliteracy has identified several of the most important of these: the networks, the nested systems, the cycles, the flows, the development, and the dynamic balance. The second core aspect of ecological literacy is design inspired by nature. According to David Orr, the goal of ecological design is to transform how humans act in the world to provide food, shelter, energy, materials, and seek their livelihood. Ecological literacy asks what people know and how should they learn it, given the limits of the earth and its systems. It demands that human actions and design conform to how the world works as a biophysical system, and that societies be designed with future generations in mind. The guiding principles and characteristics of living systems serves as a basis for envisioning and designing sustainable communities. Beyond understanding natural systems, ecological literacy is about applying this understanding to the redesign of organizations, communities, businesses, and societies to align with ecological principles. The third core aspect of ecological literacy is systems thinking. Ecological literacy is also guided by an understanding of systems or systems thinking, sometimes called holistic or relational thinking, because the system is a set of interdependent, interrelated parts that make up a complex and unified whole. It cannot be fully understood by analyzing its constituent parts. Also, ecological literacy involves applying a way of thinking that emphasizes relationships, connectedness, and context. For example, we can only understand a songbird by exploring both its own characteristics as well as its interactions with the watershed where it lives. Thinking systematically requires a number of habits of mind. These habits include seeing the whole of a system rather than snapshots of its parts, looking for patterns and connections, and uncovering and testing assumptions. There are 12 habits of mind that a systems thinker is required to have. First is sees the whole, looks for connections, pays attention to boundaries, changes perspective, looks for stocks, challenges mental models, anticipates unintended consequences, looks for change over time, sees self as part of the system, embraces ambiguity, finds leverage, and watches for win or lose attitudes. It is important to know that there is no one pedagogy, book, or computer program that will help us become better systems thinkers. Instead, the complexity of our worlds demand that we develop these habits of mind. To intentionally use systems principles to understand the complexity of everyday situations and to design for desired futures. The fourth core aspect of ecological literacy is ecological paradigm and the transition to sustainability. A truly sustainable community is alive, fresh, vital, evolving, diverse, and dynamic. It supports the health and quality of life of present and future generations while living within the limits of its social and natural system. It recognizes the need for justice and for physical, emotional, intellectual, cultural, and spiritual sustenance. Also, ecological literacy is partly aimed at triggering large-scale social change in how humans live on the planet. Teaching young people that you are part of the natural world is the basis for the shift to an ecological paradigm, a worldview that places humans as embedded in ecological systems rather than perceived as separate, and that recognizes that there are global constraints to the amount of resources we can use and waste we can produce on a finite Earth. Under the ecological paradigm and the transition to sustainability is ecological intelligence. It allows us to comprehend systems in all their complexity as well as the interplay between the natural and man-made worlds. But that understanding demands a vast store of knowledge, one so huge that no single brain can store it all. Each one of us needs the help of others to navigate the complexities of ecological intelligence. We need to collaborate. Daniel Goleman uses the term ecological intelligence to highlight the need for feedback about whether our activities are having a positive or negative impact on people and ecosystems. He makes the point that there is an urgent need for marketplace transparency and for greater human understanding of the ecological impacts of how we live. Under the fourth core aspect of ecological literacy are the 6 shifts in perception. These are 1. From parts to the whole, Second, from objects to relationships. Third, from objective knowledge to contextual knowledge. Fourth, from quantity to quality. Fifth, from structure to process. And lastly, from contents to patterns. This just means that thinking systematically requires several shifts in perception, which lead in turn to different ways to teach and different ways to organize institutions and society. These shifts are not either or alternatives, but rather movements along a continuum. The fifth and last core aspect of ecological literacy is collaboration, community building, and citizenship. Ecological literacy is about emphasizing collaboration and partnership as a hallmark of living systems and life. Ecologically literate students are also community builders and active citizens. This means that an ecological education occurs both within the natural environment and in the local community, where students can build relationships and apply their understanding in a real-world setting. Eco-literacy knowledge empowers students to help create a better society and make a difference. Ecological Literacy in a Global Issues course. The Center for Eco-Literacy suggests the following principles for the integration of ecological literacy. First, ecological literacy is not an additional concept or subject to be added to the content of the course. It may be seen rather as a perspective or way of thinking through which any selected topic or issue may be viewed. Second, it is useful to focus on guiding fundamental questions which may recur and open up conceptual links across disciplines. Third, the conceptual links that tie subjects together help make learning more effective since they lead to learning that is more readily applicable to the real world. Lastly, taking a hopeful, proactive approach and designing learning activities that engage students in potential solutions are important when teaching about environmental issues. In line with this are the core competencies for eco-literacy. First is the head or cognitive or the learning to know competency, in which young people should approach issues and situations from a systems perspective, understand fundamental ecological principles, think critically, solve problems creatively, and apply knowledge to new situations, assess the impacts and ethical effects of human technologies and actions, and envision the long-term consequences of decisions. Next is heart or emotional or learning to be competency. This means that young people should feel concern, empathy, and respect for other people and living things, see from and appreciate multiple perspectives, work with and value others with different backgrounds, motivations, and intentions, and commit to equity, justice, inclusivity, and respect for all people. Next is hands or the active or the learning to do competency, in which young people should create and use tools, objects, and procedures required by sustainable communities, turn convictions into practical and effective action, and apply ecological knowledge to the practice of ecological design, and assess and adjust uses of energy and resources. Lastly is the spirit or connectional or the learning to live together competency, in which young people should experience wonder and awe toward nature, revere the earth and all living things, feel a strong bond with and deep appreciation of place, feel kinship with the natural world, and invoke the feeling in others. In teaching ecological literacy, the following are often involved. First, weaving ecological and systems approaches into the existing curriculum in a coherent way that builds student knowledge over time. The focus should be on ecological concepts and their relationships to each other, both the big picture and the details, and to the active preservation of the ecosphere rather than incremental inclusion of ecological concepts. Next, building teacher capacity in the areas of ecological and systems thinking. Learning from nature through immersion in the real world, or nature and communities, and a deep knowledge of particular places. Next, acknowledgement of place-based and experiential outdoor learning as essential to the cognitive development, health, and well-being of children. Cultivation of a sense of wonder, creativity, and compassion for nature and for community. Transformation of the school into a living laboratory of buildings and processes that teach children about their interconnectedness to nature and their communities. And linkages to higher education resources and schools that allow students to continue the development of their ecological literacy. To be able to make our students ecologically literate individuals, these principles should be applied. Ecological literacy is the key for our generation today and in the future to have a unified environment and peaceful community, and to be able to appreciate the environment we have today and in the future. Some may not be familiar with this literacy since it is not often integrated in lessons. So, as a future teacher, we should bear in mind that this kind of literacy should be integrated in our lessons. Together, let us build a community that is sustainable and peaceful for our future generation. Thank you for listening.